We begin, though, this morning with the midterm elections, and a week out, results are still coming in.
Yeah, this morning the GOP is inching closer to regaining control of the House. There are still a few races that are yet to be called, mainly in the West. Whichever party does control the House, well, they're expected to hold a slim majority. You need 218 seats to take the House. Now, we do have an update to a key governor's contest. NBC News now projects that Democrat Katie Hobbs will become the next governor of Arizona, defeating Republican challenger Kari Lake in a hotly contested race there. Lake, who is a Trump supporter, tweeted last night criticizing the results. All this comes as former President Trump is expected to launch a third consecutive bid for the White House later today. We have team coverage ahead, including NBC's Ali Vitale with the latest on Congress, returning to Capitol Hill for the first time since last week's election. But let's begin with NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard in Florida. Yes, Florida, not Arizona. Vaughn, good morning to you. So former President Trump's expected to make an announcement today about running for re-election at that place behind you there. But we know there are some in Republican circles who've been advising against that right now. So what can we expect from Trump today? Why is he doing this now?
Look, Donald Trump has been the undeniable leader of this Republican Party for more than 7 years now. Over in 2015, 2016, he was able to eliminate a crowded Republican field. And ever since then, you have seen Republican leadership look to Donald Trump. And that is where now, here in 2024, after a close defeat in the 2020 election, losing by relatively small numbers in key states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, you are looking at a former president who is seeking revenge and wants to take on Joe Biden again in a quest for the White House. He has teased this announcement for the better part of more than a year now here, suggesting the need to take back the White House. And what you are expecting here today is him to make a 2024 announcement here. Of course, the issue for Donald Trump is the fact that he's coming off just 1 week, a very difficult week of not only electoral losses, but also he continues to find himself in the middle of multiple investigations.
Yeah, and because of last week, the House is still up for grabs. The GOP does have an edge when it comes to regaining control of the chamber, but some have blamed the former president for that lack of a red wave last week. Trump-backed candidates did not perform well. So how does that impact a potential White House bid? Does it open the door for a potential run from another Florida man, Governor Ron DeSantis?
When you look at the Republican primaries over the last year, Joe, it was the Donald Trump-backed candidates that widely won. They eliminated other candidates, even eliminated House members who voted to impeach Donald Trump after the 2020 insurrection. And so those were the folks that got the shot in the general election. But then you widely saw those candidates lose, not only U.S. Senate seats like Mehmet Oz and Blake Masters, but also in governor's races. You also had the likes of Tim Michels for governor in Wisconsin, Tudor Dixon in Michigan here. And that has led to Republicans to question whether Trumpism is the way forward in 2022. Larry Hogan, the governor of Maryland, saying, look, we have suffered 3 electoral cycles of losses now in a row. Bill Cassidy, the senator out of Louisiana, he suggested that the candidates who were focused largely on the past were those candidates who lost in 2022. The Republicans expected to take back the U.S. Senate. They didn't, and it appears they're only going to slightly hold on to the U.S. House here.
You know, Vaughn, one of the highest profile Trump-backed candidates is Kari Lake in a state you covered extensively, Arizona. We mentioned Democrat Katie Hobbs is going to be the next governor there, defeating Lake. Give us some perspective on those results and the potential impact that could have on Trump's announcement.
Look, we flew from Arizona yesterday after covering that race on the ground there for weeks, and we came here to Mar-a-Lago just moments before the race was called in favor of the Democrat, Katie Hobbs. I think it was fitting almost for this to come just one day before Trump's announcement, because it was the last chip to fall of those who were the closest allies of Donald Trump, particularly election deniers. She was really the chief among them, and in a state in which Donald Trump really needed to be able to make the case that Trumpism could prove to work in the future. But what happened is Kari Lake, who denied that Donald Trump actually lost the 2020 election, as well as Secretary of State candidate Mark Finchem, another Trump election denier. They were the latest in a string of those candidates who questioned the 2020 election, not only at the gubernatorial level, but also at the Secretary of State level. It's very difficult for Donald Trump now to make the case that going back and looking back at the 2020 2020 election was the right approach, at least in the minds of voters who roundly rejected those types of candidates here in the 2022 election, just days before Donald Trump is set to make his own 2024 announcement. Joe?
Something tells me the former president's not going to stop talking about 2020. We'll have to wait and see. Vaughn, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Let's now bring in NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale. Ali, good to see you. I want to cover a couple things this morning, so let's start with leadership on the House side. So still no word here on which party will end up controlling the House, but GOP House leaders did meet for a closed-door meeting on Capitol Hill last night to discuss conference leadership, and there's another meeting set for today also. What do we know about last night's meeting, and specifically Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy's bid to become Speaker if his party does end up in control?
Yeah, this is the complicated question that many people are asking on the House side of the Capitol lately. Republicans are forging ahead right now as if they've already won the House, because in all likelihood, if you look at the way that these races are trending, they are probably going to. Still a handful of races yet to call. But remember, flipping the House was supposed to be the easy part for Republicans. The fact that we are now a week from Election Day and this still hasn't been called is really stunning. But at the same time, it complicates things for House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. He wants to be Speaker. He's been confident about the fact that he thinks he will be Speaker. What happens today is they will have closed-door elections. That's not something that everybody in the conference is on board for. Some say they should wait. I want to show you what Matt Gaetz said. He's, again, just one member on the rightward flank of this party, but one or two members make all the difference when you have margins of really 2 or 3. Listen.
Well, it does seem a little odd to be having elections regarding who will lead a conference when we don't actually know who will comprise the conference. Republicans spend a lot of time out on the campaign trail saying we only want people to vote in elections who should be voting in those elections. And one might criticize us for a little bit of hypocrisy by holding elections when there may be people casting votes who are not going to be members of Congress. There is precisely one moment in time when there is a vote to determine who the Speaker will be. That is on January 3rd, and I think we will have far better options than Kevin McCarthy.
So Gaetz brings up 2 important threads that we're following on the Hill right now. The first is that there are some within the conference, both on the House side and on the Senate side, who want to see these leadership elections delayed. On the Senate side, those leadership elections are supposed to happen tomorrow. On the House side, they're happening today behind closed doors. But the other thing that Gaetz brings up is the important factor, which is that, yes, there will be a vote behind closed doors for Republican leadership elections up and down their ranks. They're not just voting for Speaker, they're voting for who the leader is going to be, who the whip is going to be, who the head of the House campaign chair arm is going to be. All of these different roles are going to be settled behind closed door today. But they're settled in Kevin McCarthy's case with an asterisk, because he then has to go to the House floor in January and have the full House body vote on if he's going to be Speaker. When he's there, he needs 218 votes. And so what we're watching for today is if he falls short of 200, that's a really big problem for Kevin McCarthy. If he's just a few shy of 218, that means that he's got some work to do, but he has a challenger. The Freedom Caucus here is determined to show that nobody has 218 votes, and that means McCarthy is going to have to do some dealing if he wants this job.
And we know it's a thread that you'll be following all the way until January for us. Ali, also, before I let you go, I want to ask you about this bill that would protect same-sex marriage after this bipartisan group of senators unveiled a deal earlier Monday. Are there enough votes to get that passed to filibuster to move the measure to the president's desk?
Look, they say they're confident that they have the votes. This is the same thing that we were watching 6 weeks ago before they went home to all campaign for the midterm elections. At that point, I could count to maybe 7 or 8 Republicans who were on board for this bill. But the people who are close to it, who are doing the whipping, both on the Republican and Democratic side, they say they have 10. And look, people like Mitch McConnell, who everyone in that Republican caucus watches so closely on the Senate side, he has not said which way he's going to go. And in many cases, he has seemed to leave the door open. This is something that you could see more than 10 Republicans get on board for, but the people close to the process say they're confident that they have 10 to codify the right to marry within the same sex and protect that, what was decided in the Supreme Court, but now protecting that at the federal level.
All right, Ali Vitale, thank you so much.
President Biden's plan for student debt relief is facing a new setback this morning. A federal appeals court has issued a nationwide injunction temporarily blocking the program, which would cancel up to $20,000 in student debt for millions of Americans. For more on this, let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos. Danny, good morning to you. So yesterday's ruling, it came after 6 states sued, arguing the program threatens their future tax revenues and circumvents congressional authority. Talk us through this injunction, what it means for students who have already applied for relief.
The states lost at the district court level, the trial court level, but then they appealed up to the 8th Circuit, which is the midway point between the district court and the Supreme Court of the United States. And the states actually won at the 8th Circuit. The 8th Circuit concluded. Now, this is, I say win, but we're dealing with injunctions here, and injunctions are not about winning the ultimate case. Instead, injunctions are a court saying, okay, while we're deciding the merits of this case, which could take years, what should the status quo be? Who stands to be harmed the most? And in this case, the plaintiff states made the argument that if the student loan debt is canceled or if this goes into effect, they could lose millions upon millions of dollars. The district court originally said, you don't have standing. You don't even have any business being in court. And the appellate court said, no, there is standing because this arm, this entity that's related to the state of Missouri, stands to lose many millions of dollars, and that could harm the state of Missouri. So all the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals did was hit the pause button. Nobody wins, nobody loses. We're just pausing, and the pause is in favor of the plaintiff states until everything is sorted out.
So as you say, Danny, this is a long process. The White House says it's going to keep fighting what it calls the baseless lawsuits against it. So what are the options the Biden administration has right now to get the injunction lifted and try and move forward with this?
The Biden administration could continue in court, but there have been murmurs that the Biden administration may take a non-litigation angle, and that might be just trying to continue the moratorium. In other words, if they can't proceed with canceling the debt outright, then the Biden administration may continue just holding off students having to repay these loans, hitting the pause button itself. And how long can it do that? Well, that's a political question. It can't do it indefinitely, and it certainly can't do it beyond a Biden administration, whether the first or the second, doesn't matter. So this is a non-litigation solution, but it's only a Band-Aid if the Biden administration decides to go that route.
So, Danny, we know this is just the latest legal challenge for the president's student debt relief plan. Last week, the Biden administration stopped accepting applications after a federal district judge in Texas struck down the plan and called it unconstitutional. Real quickly, what does this mean for the future of the student debt program?
The Biden administration is a difficult decision to make. I mean, they can continue with a two-pronged attack. They can continue to appeal, but they may not feel that confident about appealing if they head up to the Supreme Court, which has a known conservative leaning majority. So they might be hostile to the Biden administration's argument. But of course, you never know until you try. And then on the other hand, going outside the courts, the Biden administration may choose to just continue this pause on demanding or student loan repayment obligations. But that, again, is only a short-term solution. The Biden administration knows that. And for that reason alone, they may decide not to go that route.
All right. Danny Cevallos, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Let's head to Indonesia now, where this morning President Biden has been meeting with world leaders at the G20 summit. Obviously, a huge point of focus with this group is the war in Ukraine. And actually earlier, President Zelensky addressed members by video conference, urging them to keep up the pressure on Russia and help end the war. NBC News Chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander is at the summit for us in Bali. Peter, good to see you. So we understand the G20 leaders are considering a draft resolution to condemn the war in Ukraine. But let's talk about how complicated that's going to be, with obviously so many different viewpoints here, not to mention, of course, the fact that Russia is one of the members. Will this be possible?
Yes, Savannah, I want to get to that point in a moment, but just some news that's developing here within the last few minutes. We've learned from the White House that President Biden would not be attending what is the gala dinner where the leaders of those 19 nations and the European Union get together, sort of a formal setting where they celebrate their ties and have opportunities to talk to one another when cameras are not watching them. The White House just announcing that the president would be going back to his hotel, or that we know that the president went back to his hotel. I just spoke to the press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, who says it's it's nothing urgent. I asked her if this was anything to do with the president's health. Yesterday, he acknowledged he had a cold. She said no, that he is just fine and will continue with other events tomorrow. Just want to keep you posted on that as it's just been developing here as you have been speaking. But as it relates to the effort of the president here, he's really been zeroed in on trying to get sort of a united front by the G20 nations, condemning Russia, demanding that Russia leaves Ukraine immediately. President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke out today as well via a video address saying that now is the time for Russia to leave its country. But the bottom line is there are some divisions among these nations, even as they work on whatever the sort of joint statement might be here. India and China among them, who have been reluctant to condemn Russia to this point. Savannah?
Peter, also, I want to ask about the big news yesterday, of course, out of this was the meeting between President Biden and President Xi. We know you've actually been speaking with Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. She was present during those talks. What did she have to say about that meeting from an economic perspective?
Well, I asked her specifically as it relates to the relationship between these two countries, where there's certainly differences. President Biden dismissing the idea that we are on the cusp of a new Cold War between the countries. But obviously, Taiwan is one of the real flashpoints there. I asked her whether there was, if not a military war between the two countries, an economic war right now, and what that looks like. And here's part of what the Treasury Secretary told me.
Well, I don't think we're involved in an economic war. We each have some concerns about the other country's economic practices, and we agreed, President and President Xi agreed last night that we need to discuss these in greater detail. But although we're competing on a range of issues, conflict is not something that either country seeks, and you know, we're looking for peaceful resolution of differences.
Part of my conversation with the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen that took place earlier today. Notably, Yellen will be meeting with the Chinese central bank governor, effectively not the finance minister, but someone who's heavily involved in their economic situation before she leaves here in Bali. Savannah.
Peter, also just quickly, I know when you had the Treasury Secretary, you had to ask about this decades high inflation we've been seeing. What did she say?
Yeah. Well, obviously, that's the top issue on the top of mind for Americans right now, as evidenced by the midterms, where that, even above abortion rights, was the top issue motivating those voters as they went to the polls. And I asked her specifically about the job market and some recent layoffs. She said, among other things, that the market may be a little less hot, but still remains quite solid. And here's what she told me about the inflationary situation in the country, those record highs, the highest they've been in 40 years, but some good indications in the last month that the number may have already peaked. Here was her response.
I think, look, over the next couple of years, I definitely think that inflation will come back down toward normal levels we're accustomed to. I don't want to forecast on a month-by-month basis. We had a good, solid report on the Consumer Price Index last month, but one reading isn't enough to make a judgment about where things are heading in the coming months.
Secretary Yellen there saying that she thought it would come down over the next couple of years. Finally, Savannah, I asked her about her timing, how long she expected to serve in her role amid speculation that she might leave her position after the midterm. She said she intends to stick around. I asked her for how long would she stay through the remainder of the term, and she said to me simply, "You bet." Savannah.
All right, Peter, thank you so much for that, and keep us posted if we hear anything about the president.
Time now for your morning news now weather and the positively chilly temps we're seeing from coast to coast.
That's right. Meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us now. Hey, Michelle.
Hey there, guys. Yeah, that's the big story. We are looking temperatures once again 10 to 20 degrees below normal for this time of year. And that cold stretches down to the south, even to the Gulf Coast states. And it's cold enough to snow. So we're looking at snow this morning in portions of the Midwest into the Great Lakes. And we're going to see some snow into the Northeast, interior parts of Northeast, and also New England, and then continuing in the Great Lakes as we go throughout tonight into tomorrow. Also looking at heavy rain down to the south throughout the Tennessee Valley, the Southeast, where you see those brighter colors. That's where we're seeing the heaviest rain. And You're even seeing a little pink and purple right around West Virginia and Kentucky. So we're seeing some mixed precipitation, too. And we'll see that, too, in the interior parts of the Northeast. 29 million people impacted by a winter weather advisory or a winter storm warning, mostly a winter weather advisory that's stretching through portions of the plains into the Midwest, the Great Lakes, and then we're looking at New England down to along the Appalachians. So as we go throughout today, we're looking at some snow falling, and that will continue tonight into tomorrow morning, mainly for New England tonight into tomorrow morning in the interior portions of the Northeast. But notice some pinks and purples showing up on the map, especially in New England. We're looking at higher amounts there. Could see up to 5-6 inches there. And we're looking at rainfall developing in the Northeast as well, the Mid-Atlantic too, where you see the yellows, so parts of New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, into Virginia. We're looking at some heavier rain falling tonight into tomorrow morning. That's going to develop later on this afternoon. Also looking at the chance for stronger storms along the Gulf Coast. Could see winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour and could see some small hail as well. So we're watching storm systems moving across the country, and that's bringing that cold rain later on today in the Mid-Atlantic, the Northeast, bands of snow in the Great Lakes. And then by tomorrow, moderate snowfall for northern New England. But those cold winds are going to stay in place, and we're looking at that cold blast from coast to coast. Temperatures in the 20s and 30s. Kansas City, guys, just 36 degrees today. That is 17 degrees below normal. Notice Houston, 55 degrees. Back to you.
Chilly, chilly, chilly. All right.
It is right here, too. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.